March 19, 1922, Bavaria, Germany. Andreas Gruber woke up that morning like he'd done for the past 40 years. Same creaking floorboards, same cold air biting through the farmhouse walls, same routine. Feed the animals, check the fences, keep the farm running, but something had been bothering him for days. 3 days earlier, he'd found footprints in the snow. They came from the forest edge, crossed the open field, and stopped right at the house. Just stopped. No prints leading away, no trail back into the woods, like whoever made them had simply vanished into thin air. He'd mentioned it to his daughter Victoria. She brushed it off. Probably some traveler cutting through their property. Maybe someone lost. Andreas wanted to believe that, but the prints didn't lie. They ended at his door. The Gruber farm sat in complete isolation. No neighbors within shouting distance, no electricity, no telephone. Just oil lamps, wood stoves, and the kind of silence that makes you hear every sound your house makes at night. The place was called Hinterkaifeck, means back corner of Kaifeck. Fitting name. Middle of nowhere doesn't begin to describe it. 6 people lived there. Andreas, 63 years old. His wife, Cecilia, 72. Their daughter, Victoria, 35, widowed. Her 2 kids, Cecilia, 7 years old, and Joseph, barely 2. And Maria Baumgartner, the new maid. She'd just arrived that very day. 44 years old, came from a nearby town looking for work. The previous maid had quit 6 months earlier, walked out without much explanation. Later, she told people in the village the house scared her, said she heard footsteps in the attic when everyone was downstairs, heard voices when she was alone. The Grubers had laughed it off. Old farmhouses creak. Wind gets under the floorboards. Nothing supernatural about it. But Andreas kept thinking about those footprints. That same week, he'd noticed something else. A newspaper showed up in their house, one he'd never purchased. Someone had been inside. He searched the attic, checked every corner of the barn, found nothing. But the sensation of being watched wouldn't leave him, like eyes following him around his own property. On March 31st, a Friday late afternoon, Andreas and Victoria headed to the barn. Routine evening chores. Feed the livestock. Check on the cows. The sun was already dipping low, casting long shadows across the yard. They walked through that barn door and never walked back out. An hour passed, maybe more. Cecilia, the grandmother, got worried. She put on her shawl and went looking for them. Crossed the muddy yard, pushed open the barn door, called their names. Silence. She stepped inside. And then she was gone too. Young Cecilia, the 7-year-old, was sent to find her grandmother. The little girl, bundled up in her wool coat, walked across the property calling out for anyone to answer. The barn door stood half open. She went in. Nothing. Maria Baumgartner realized something was very wrong. She'd been in the house for less than 24 hours, and now everyone had disappeared. She grabbed an oil lamp. The flame flickered as she walked toward the barn. Darkness was settling in fast. She called their names. Her voice echoed against the wooden walls. No response. She stepped through the doorway. By the next morning, 2-year-old Joseph was alone in the house, crying. The fire in the stove had died out. The rooms were freezing. No one came. No one comforted him. No one picked him up. All 6 of them were already dead. And someone was still in the house with him. 4 days. That's how long it took for anyone to realize something was wrong. The Grubers kept to themselves. That was well known around the village. Their nearest neighbors lived over a mile away through fields and forest. Mail wasn't delivered to the farm. Andreas picked it up in town when he felt like it. So when he stopped showing up, people just figured he was busy. Spring planting season, fence repairs, normal farm stuff, April 4th, Tuesday. The postman had a delivery for Hinterkaifeck. He made the long walk to the property, knocked on the door. No answer. Tried again. Nothing. He tested the door handle. Locked. That was unusual. The Grubers never locked up during daylight hours. He walked around to the back of the house. The barn door was standing open. He called out. The wind answered. A smell hung in the air, faint but wrong. The kind of smell that makes your stomach turn without knowing why. He left quickly. Later that afternoon, neighbors finally decided to check on the family. 3 men walked to Hinterkaifeck together. The house looked normal from the outside, curtains drawn, but smoke was coming from the chimney. Someone had been keeping the fire going. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. They approached the barn. The smell was stronger now. One of them pushed the door open wider. Sunlight spilled across the dirt floor. And then they saw it. Bodies, stacked under hay and old tarps like someone had tried to hide them. Andreas lay face down, his skull destroyed. Next to him, Victoria, then old Cecilia, then the little girl, 7-year-old Cecilia. 4 people, 4 bodies, all in the barn, all dead for days. The men ran to the house. They burst through the door, shouting for anyone still alive. The kitchen was clean, table set for a meal that never happened, dishes stacked neatly, firewood by the stove, everything in its place. They found Maria Baumgartner in her bedroom, still in her nightgown. She'd been killed in her sleep. Her body was cold. Rigor mortis had long since come and gone. She'd been dead since Friday night, just hours after she'd arrived at the farm. In the next room they found Josef. The 2-year-old lay in his crib, a blanket pulled up around him. His small skull had been fractured. But unlike the others, he hadn't died right away. The investigators would later determine he'd survived for hours, maybe longer. There were tear stains on his face. The blankets had been arranged around him almost carefully, like someone had tucked him in. Someone had stayed in that house after the murders, lived there, while 6 bodies decomposed in the barn and bedroom, while a dying toddler cried in his crib. The police arrived by evening. Inspector Georg Gruber took charge of the investigation. He walked through every room, took notes, examined everything. The house was clean, orderly, not ransacked. Nothing appeared stolen. The kitchen table had been set for breakfast that morning, fresh bread in the pantry. Firewood recently added to the pile. Someone had been living normally in this house, eating their food, sleeping in their beds, maintaining the property for 3 full days, while the Gruber family rotted 20 meters away. The question wasn't just who killed them, the question was who stayed and why. Inspector Georg Gruber had seen a lot in his career. Rural murders, domestic disputes gone wrong, bar fights that ended badly, but this was different. The crime scene made no sense. He started with the barn. The murder weapon was a mattock, a farming tool with a heavy blade used for breaking up soil. It had been left near the bodies, covered in dried matter. Forensic examination would later confirm it belonged to the Grubers. Someone had grabbed it right off their own property and used it against them. The attack pattern was methodical. Each victim struck from behind. Quick, efficient, no hesitation. Andreas went down first, then Victoria, then old Cecilia, then the 7-year-old girl. All within minutes of each other. They'd been lured out one by one, called to the barn under some pretense. Maybe Andreas heard a noise with the animals, went to check. Victoria went looking for him, then her mother, then the child. Each one walked into a trap. But here's where it got strange. The autopsies revealed they all died on Friday evening, March 31st, between 6 and 8 in the evening. Maria Baumgartner, the maid, died later that night. She'd been killed in her bed, still wearing her nightgown, which meant she'd gone to sleep completely unaware that 4 people were already dead in the barn 20 meters away. How had she not heard anything? How had she not noticed? The house had thin walls. You could hear conversations from one room to another. Yet Maria went to bed, fell asleep and woke up never. Someone crept into her room and struck her while she slept. And then there was Joseph, the 2-year-old. The medical examiner determined the boy had been struck but didn't die immediately. His injuries were severe, a fractured skull, but he'd survived for hours afterward, maybe longer. There were small handprints on the crib rails. He'd tried to climb out, tried to call for someone, and someone had been there. Someone heard him crying. Someone pulled the blanket up around him and left him there to die slowly. That detail haunted Gruber more than anything else. The neighbors confirmed what the evidence suggested. On Saturday, April 1st, the day after the murders, smoke had been rising from the chimney. Multiple people saw it. On Sunday, April 2nd, smoke again. Someone had been keeping the fire going, feeding it, maintaining it. The animals had been fed. The cows had been milked. Someone had done the daily chores. For 3 days, someone lived at Hinterkaifeck like nothing had happened. Gruber searched the attic, up the narrow wooden stairs into the cramped space under the roof. Dust everywhere. But in one corner, he found something. Straw arranged like a makeshift bed. Clear indentations in the dust where someone had been lying down. Not just once, repeatedly, for weeks, maybe months. Someone had been living in the attic, sleeping up there, listening to the family below, watching their routines, learning their patterns. Andreas had been right. The footprints in the snow, the strange newspaper, the sounds the previous maid heard. It hadn't been paranoia. Someone had been there all along. The investigation expanded. Police interviewed over 100 people, anyone who'd ever had contact with the Grubers, anyone with a grudge, anyone who might know something. They found plenty of rumors. Andreas had a reputation, not a pleasant man, cold, controlling. Victoria's husband had died in the war, but there were whispers about her and Andreas. Uncomfortable whispers. Joseph, the 2-year-old, didn't look like Victoria's dead husband. He looked like Andreas. Those rumors got the police interested in family dynamics, but they didn't explain the attic, didn't explain someone staying for days after the murders. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was something else entirely. The suspects piled up fast, too fast. Lorenz Schlittenbauer was at the top of the list, local farmer. Knew the Grubers well, too well. He'd had a relationship with Victoria years earlier. Some people thought Joseph might be his son, not Andreas's. That would give him motive. Jealousy, anger, wanting to erase the whole family. But his alibi was solid. Multiple witnesses placed him nowhere near Hinterkaifeck on March 31st. And he'd been one of the men who discovered the bodies, walked right into that barn and found them. His reaction seemed genuine. Shock, horror. Not the behavior of someone who'd spent 3 days living with corpses. Still, something about Schlittenbauer felt off to investigators. He'd touched things at the crime scene, moved items around before police arrived, claimed he was looking for survivors. Maybe he was covering something up. Next was Carl Gabriel, Victoria's husband. Except he was supposed to be dead, killed in the war. But his body had never been confirmed, never identified. What if he'd survived, come back and found his wife living with her own father in what looked like an incestuous relationship? That would drive someone to murder. Police chased that theory hard, checked military records, searched for any sign Gabriel had returned to Germany, found nothing, no evidence he was alive, no sightings, no trace. Then there was the drifter theory. Someone passing through, saw the isolated farm, saw an opportunity, hid in the attic, waited, struck when the moment was right, then stayed to rest, eat, recover before moving on. That theory fit some of the evidence, the attic bed, the stranger living in the house after. But it didn't explain the precision of the murders, didn't explain how the killer knew to lure them out one by one. A random drifter wouldn't know the family's routines, wouldn't know their schedule. The murder weapon bothered investigators too. A mattock, agricultural tool, heavy, brutal, but also common. Every farm had one. It wasn't brought from outside. The killer used what was available. which suggested familiarity with the property. Weeks turned into months. The case went cold. The bodies were buried, well, most of them. The heads were removed first, sent to Munich for examination. Forensic science was advancing. Maybe the skulls could tell them something. Reveal details about the killer's height, strength, angle of attack. The heads were sent to the Munich Institute, studied, measured, analyzed, then stored, and eventually lost. Somewhere in the chaos of the 1920s, then the rise of the Nazi Party, then World War II, the skulls of the Gruber family disappeared. They've never been found. By 1923, the investigation stalled completely. Over 100 suspects questioned, none charged. The case remained open but inactive. Inspector Gruber moved on to other cases, other murders, other mysteries. Hinterkaifeck sat empty. No one wanted to live there. No one wanted to work that land. Locals said it was cursed, haunted, the kind of place you avoid after dark. In 1923, the farmhouse was torn down, every piece of wood, every stone, dismantled and removed. The land was sold, eventually absorbed into neighboring properties. Today, there's nothing left, just fields, trees, no marker, no memorial. The case has never been solved. 90 years later, theories still circulate. Books have been written, documentaries made. Amateur investigators comb through old records looking for something the police missed. But whoever killed the Gruber family got away with it, lived in their house, ate their food, slept in their beds, then walked away into history. 6 people dead, 1 toddler left to die slowly, and nobody ever answered for it. That's the legacy of Hinterkaifeck. The Hinterkaifeck case became something more than an unsolved murder. It became a ghost story, a cautionary tale. The kind of thing parents in Bavaria told their kids to keep them from wandering too far from home after dark. But strip away the legend and you're left with facts. Cold, hard, disturbing facts. 6 people were murdered over the course of several hours on an isolated farm in March 1922. The killer used a tool from their own property, struck each victim from behind with precision, showed no hesitation, no mercy, and then stayed. That's the part that separates this case from almost any other murder in history. The killer didn't run, didn't panic, didn't flee into the night. Instead, they remained at Hinterkaifeck for 3 full days, living normally, feeding animals, milking cows, keeping the fire burning, eating meals at the kitchen table, while 6 bodies decomposed meters away. What kind of person does that? What psychology explains staying in a house where you've just committed mass murder? Investigators at the time had no framework for understanding it. Criminal profiling didn't exist yet. The concept of a serial killer wasn't established. They were trying to solve this with 1920s police work, and it simply wasn't enough. Modern criminologists have looked at the case with fresh eyes. Some believe the killer knew the family intimately, had to. The level of comfort they showed afterward suggests familiarity with the property. They knew where the food was kept, how to work the stove, how to care for the livestock. That's not knowledge a stranger picks up. Others point to the attic evidence. Someone had been living there for weeks, possibly months. Watching, learning, studying the family's patterns. That's stalking behavior, obsessive behavior. The kind of thing you see in cases involving fixation or delusion. The sexual abuse rumors complicate everything. If Andreas really was Joseph's father, that creates a whole web of possible motives. Shame, rage, revenge. Maybe someone close to the family knew about it and snapped. Maybe Victoria herself was involved somehow, though she died in the barn alongside her father. The lack of robbery as a motive rules out most practical explanations. Nothing of value was taken. Money was left untouched. Jewelry remained. This wasn't about theft. It was personal, deeply, horrifyingly personal. Some researchers have theorized the killer was someone from Victoria's past. An ex-lover, a rejected suitor, someone who couldn't accept she'd moved on. The fact that she and Andreas were killed first supports that. They were the primary targets. Everyone else was collateral, witnesses who had to be eliminated. But then why Maria? The maid had just arrived that day. She knew nothing, posed no threat. Killing her suggests the murderer's goal wasn't just revenge. It was annihilation. Total erasure of everyone at Hinterkaifeck. And Joseph, that 2-year-old boy who survived for hours with a fractured skull, who cried, who tried to climb out of his crib. The killer heard him and did nothing, let him suffer. That level of cruelty points to someone detached from normal human empathy, someone capable of extreme violence without remorse. The footprints in the snow remain one of the most chilling details. 3 days before the murders, Andreas found tracks leading to the house but not away, which means the killer was already inside when Andreas noticed them. Already hiding, already waiting. Imagine that. Knowing someone is in your house, searching and finding nothing, going to bed each night wondering if you imagined it, and then realizing too late that you were right all along. The previous maid who quit had heard footsteps in the attic, heard voices. She wasn't imagining things either. Someone was up there, listening to her, watching her. She got out. She survived. The Grubers didn't. In 2007, students from the Fürstenfeldbruck Police Academy reopened the case as a training exercise. They used modern forensic techniques, built a 3-dimensional model of the crime scene, analyzed blood spatter patterns, re-interviewed descendants of witnesses. They narrowed it down to one suspect, someone who had connections to the family, who had means, motive, and opportunity. But the person had died decades earlier. No way to confirm, no way to prosecute. The case remained officially unsolved. Today, Hinterkaifeck exists only in photographs and police reports. The farm is gone. The land has been reclaimed. Trees grow where the barn once stood. Fields stretch across what used to be the Gruber property. But the questions remain. Who killed them? Why did they stay? Where did they go afterward? And the most disturbing question of all, did they ever kill again? Somewhere in Bavaria or somewhere else in Europe, there might be other unsolved cases from the 1920s. Other murders with strange details, other crime scenes where the killer lingered too long, behaved too comfortably. We'll probably never know. The Hinterkaifeck killer took their secret to the grave, left behind only corpses and questions. 6 lives erased, 1 family destroyed, and a mystery that's haunted Germany for over 100 years. That's the real horror of this case. Not ghosts, not curses, just the cold reality that someone got away with it, walked free, lived their life, maybe died peacefully in old age while the Grubers rotted in the ground. Justice was never served, the truth was never found. And Hinterkaifeck remains one of the most disturbing unsolved murders in history.